Good morning. This is the Innovation Conversation. Tom, how you doing?
Doing well, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing great. So I'm actually looking forward to this weekend and next week because, such as it is, the entire Morning News Beat team, which is to say you, Michael, and me, will be in Las Vegas for the National Grocers Association convention. And we're all part of on Sunday, the tech track that has been programmed for 3 hours to 10 to 1. Lots of different stuff going on. I got lucky because NGA actually asked me to kind of program and curate it. And then I called you guys up first and said, okay.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting to me. And I just want to kind of preview it a little bit. I didn't intend it this way, actually, when I started. I sort of didn't know what the puzzle was going to look like. I just started pulling together interesting people with interesting companies and then sort of figuring out how it would fit. But one of the things that I've sort of noticed as the puzzle has sort of taken shape is that it's really all about, almost every session has a data component to it. And and looking at it in the bigger picture, it's about how data properly used and appropriately used basically can eliminate friction, which is when I thought about it, that's actually a pretty good theme, even if I only backed into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously the theme of eliminating friction is massively important. I think any retailer, tries to or aspires to reduce the friction in their experience. And, whenever I hear friction or frictionless, I still go back to Trebek from circa 1998 or 1999 with Agentry Agenda. There you go.
I have the Bible on my desk.
Frictionless marketplace.
Right.
Right. We're not quite frictionless yet, but I totally agree, and I hear you that I think most technology companies today, everybody has a data component of what they do, right? I mean, you're delivering technology that's impacting the experience. There's customer touch points through that experience that ultimately lead to a sale. And you have the data and analytics that help you understand, what happened to enable that sale, and you can leverage that data to eliminate any friction or bump points, in that. So I love the fact that it's coming together and sounding and feeling like that. I think that's going to be a real hit.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just the session that you and I are doing together, it's actually us on stage, along with the guys from Sifter, right? Placer.ai, which allows you to figure out where to put a store based on traffic data, as well as Zippin, which is about, checkout free stores. And it's interesting to me, and one of the things I think we really ought to talk about is, first of all of you, you're there representing Replenium, automatic replenishment. They're all about using data in different kinds of ways to create a better customer experience and a more, that is with less friction. But it seems to me that one of the things we ought to talk about is the notion that in many companies, now we're going to be talking to independent retailers who are by their and regionals who are smaller than the big guys. But many companies, if they decided, like, best of all possible worlds, oh no, we're going to use Placer.ai to figure out where we need to put a store to target our core customer base. We're going to use Replenium for automatic replenishment. We're going to use Sifter because we want to be able to get people to get to the products that matter to them. And when you actually come into the store, we're going to use Zippin to make it easier to leave, right? So great. This is like,
awesome.
See ya. You've used all four. But the problem is, I think at a lot of retailers, those four components often would be thought of within silos. They wouldn't necessarily be connected. And one of the things we got to talk about is retail implementation, retail execution. What do retailers need to do to adjust the way they think so that they see the integration that hopefully we're going to be able to lay out for them in our session?
Man, there's a lot in that setup.
That's a really long one.
There's a lot in that setup. And I'll break it down piece by piece. And I will say that all of us tech providers, we're going to have to come up with the NGA bundle.
Right.
So if you can bundle us, and we'll give you some kind of deal for implementing the four of us over some period of time.
There you go.
No, I'm kidding. Well, maybe not kidding. I don't know.
Not. I think
We'll see where it goes. You got NGA promo code. No. So, man, that's interesting. So, I've spoken on this conversation for years and written back when we used to write about, the importance of customer centricity and focusing on your customer and determining what it is you're going to solve for that customer, and then working back through your strategy to deliver that. And to me, and in the environments where I really learned that, being Wegmans and Amazon primarily, very customer centric retailers that in the times I was at those companies lived that customer centricity, right? So that customer centricity really did help you kind of rationalize what your roadmap would be for what it is you're delivering, and frankly would break down silos, would eliminate internal friction, because of the power of your belief in the thing you were going to solve for your customer, right? And different companies would do it differently. Wegmans had a different way of kind of capturing the priorities. Amazon had its own way of capturing the priorities, where you'd write the press release, you'd write the strategy documents, and kind of everybody would rally around that. I think we're seeing in more retailers now, particularly in the larger retailers, you're seeing executives that are being charged with customer experience. Everybody should be charged with customer experience, but you're starting to see a person that's titled, their role is customer experience, and they are charged with delivering this, omni-channel, for lack of a better term, experience across digital and physical, and rolling that all together, and that help them, determine that roadmap. But I do think, and we see this all too often, the traditional retail tech product roadmap, the traditional retail prioritization of that roadmap, that in itself actually introduces friction by design, because it's designed to introduce rigor, right, around what you're going to implement and when and how. But we see far too often that the traditional kind of rigors around the roadmap, or traditional friction that's introduced around the roadmap, ends up to be debilitating for the retailer. They don't move fast enough because of this entrenched infrastructure.
Yeah. Is it the economics of the moment? I mean, we're at a time of relatively high inflation, compared to 2 years ago, as opposed to compared to 30 years ago, right? Or 40 years ago. And people have a recessionary mindset, even if we're not actually in a recession yet. Is it that set of circumstances that it sort of is getting in the way of implementation and execution? Or is it culture? Is it just because it's so easy to say, well, let's slow down, as opposed to let's speed up?
Well, cost is always a factor,
right?
Of course, it's always a factor. I would say now the cost of technology relative to the impact of these innovations is way cheaper than it ever has been, right? It used to be, tech infrastructure was expensive. Pre-cloud, you had massive amounts of hardware and software, that you'd have to put in for a tech implementation. That stuff was all way more expensive, because Moore's law has brought that stuff down over time. The cloud has brought it down over time. New coding and architectures have brought it over, and integration technologies have brought it all down over time. So I would say, from a cost standpoint, it's never been better. And most everything can be variable, right? So most every technology can be based on its output, right? Or at least an element of the economics or the cost of that can be based on its output. So I would say that shouldn't be a driving factor. I think that's used as an excuse or reason to slow things down. I think it's absolutely cultural. To me, it is all about culture. Culture allows you to have, too much. Again, rigor is actually positive, but it allows you to have to introduce too much friction. It allows you to, in many folks in their job performance, it's safer to say, let's go slower. They're not necessarily measured on the speed and output and execution of these things, or at least held to it. They're allowed to delay. They're allowed to put up, they're allowed to put up roadblocks and impediments to success. We just see it far too often, across. There are some retailers that are amazing, and they'll line up and they'll go, and they will not be denied bringing innovation to their customers. But there's others that I think it's just letting culture and letting entrenched beliefs, and entrenched behavior, be considered acceptable.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, you talk about the cost being cheaper than ever or less expensive than ever. I mean, the other thing is so many of these retailers, they have the building blocks in place. It's like they've laid the foundation already. And it would be like owning a plot of land and laying the foundation and saying, okay, we'll come back and build that later when bricks or wood or whatever you're using, maybe the price of those come down, or when the guy next door decides to build his house, or that you can always find a reason not to do it. And yet you're still paying to follow this metaphor, which may be faulty through, you're still paying, you've already paid for the foundation, you're paying taxes on the land, right? You've still got costs associated with that. And you're then giving the people who are building on either side of you potentially an advantage. And maybe actually the metaphor works better with commercial real estate, right? We'll lay the foundation, but we're going to wait for other people to open stores first.
Right. Meanwhile, you've got to service that
first.
Yeah.
They're going to have first access to the customers.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I hear you. It's and again, you can't willy-nilly go and just, you can't, put up the, there's a sequencing that you have to do to build the house, right? But as long as you know who you're building it for, you have a good plan, you should be able to build it relatively quickly and then make it productive. And I think retailers really need to be thinking, be thinking more along those lines. We've seen a big wave of retail innovation since the beginning of COVID, much of it forced on the industry.
Right.
So I think retailers in general are far better positioned now in early mid 2023 to serve an evolving customer than they were in early 2020. Like, I think we're way ahead of where we were. I think we're way behind where we should be still, but we're way ahead of where we were.
Yeah.
So now is not, even in uncertain times, it is not the time to slow down, because when customers are uncertain, they get a wandering eye, right? And they start to, whether it's economically driven, whether it's experientially driven, whether it's, utility driven, they're going to go and shop the retailers that are solving today's needs better. And customers are under more pressure today the pandemic led a whole new level of fear in customer, in pressure to customers. But today it's an acute set of challenges that customers have. And you have a set of technologies available to you as you decide how it is you're going to solve that customer's problem. Continuing, business as usual is, for most retailers, is not going to bode well for them over time.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, and I know we've said this numerous times here, which is that, right, the retailers innovated during the pandemic because they didn't think of it as innovation. They thought of it as being survival. They had no choice.
Yeah. And
the challenge was going to be, coming out of the pandemic, to maintain that pace of innovation.
Yeah.
They were able to do things to be both relevant and resonant to their customers quickly, because they didn't think about it as innovation. And if they could adopt that mindset and that approach going forward, it would serve them better in the long term.
No doubt. I mean, that's a big unlock. That's a huge unlock when you, and Now, granted, maybe not quite at the level of urgency, or as chaotically as it was during that time, but I think there's an unlock in that clarity of who your customer is and how you need to be agile and nimble to serve them.
Yeah. And yet, I wonder if, and again, all the evidence isn't in yet, but I wonder if the evidence suggests that not nearly enough retailers did that, right? That not nearly enough retailers came out of the pandemic thinking to themselves, fine, we're good. Everything's good. I don't have to innovate at the same pace. I actually had a conversation with a retailer the other day who actually said to me, oh no, he said, we know we're executing well because we did really well during the pandemic. I'm paraphrasing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just said, really? Didn't you just have to really, as long as you could bring product in the back door, if you opened your front door, most of it was going to go. Your problem, you had other issues, you had other problems.
Yeah, you had safety, you had a lot of things you had to accommodate and solve for during that.
But selling product was not the problem, right? And to convince yourself that, to use the old line, you were born on second base, so you think you hit a double is sort of a mistake. I don't think he appreciated my characterization, but I think that becomes a real problem going forward. I think that, and especially independent retailers right now, because whether the big ones innovate fast or not, they still have resources. Independent retailers have fewer resources, and they've got to continue to keep that gas down as much as they can. Maybe not doing 80 miles an hour, but they certainly got to maintain 55 or 60.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's fair that coming out of the pandemic, you take a breath.
Right.
Right. That was a tumultuous time. The industry performed, amazingly for customers and was there, and I think shined, through the pandemic. It's very fair to take a breath and, just, kind of rethink your strategy, get folks aligned in a more methodical way, but with, renewed passion for your customer, especially what you just help your customer through, and they're thankful for what you did.
Right.
So now let's take the customer to the next level where they want to go, and I think independence. Yes, you have fewer resources relative to the scale of your company generally. However, you also have tech partners that generally can do a lot of the lifting that big organizations used to do, and frankly, that larger organizations, you're almost hindered by your breadth of resources because there's just more you have to manage, right, to be able to orchestrate your output. Whereas I think an independent with a leaner team and probably closer to their customers, I think you're at an advantage where you can be way more agile. You might not do as many things as the big guys do, but the things you do, I think you can be really crisp on. You can really impact the customer, and because you're smaller, you can scale it within your world way faster.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's going to be great to see you in Vegas. We're actually going to do a special live in the same room innovation conversation next week from NGA. So I'm looking forward to that. And thanks as always. And I'll see you in Vegas.
Sounds great, Kevin. See you this weekend.
See you, everybody. Take care.